our day. That's is Hamza, and I have a special guest, JoAnn, and
Hello.
this is intrinsic motivation from a homie's perspective. And I'm actually, for all my shamanic friends out there, I'm going to channel my inner parrot because friends that know me always hear me go, Rah! JoAnn says, Rah! JoAnn says, but JoAnn says, Rah! They're like, who is this JoAnn? And here we have her. So she is, if it weren't for JoAnn, David would not exist.
That's true.
And this podcast probably would not exist because we were put our first podcast, we were talking about synchronicities and God winks. And we were sitting here like, what are we going to talk about? And we're like, well, how did we get together? And I obviously, and people know this, but I met you through Horizon Center of Intuitive Awareness.
Yes.
And David, his initial entree into this world was with the Berkeley Psychic Institute. And you were at Berkeley Psychic
Yes,
Institute,
I
and you
was.
actually started Horizon Center of Intuitive Awareness. So you guys are in for a treat because this is the originator, and she's been a huge staple in the Atlanta spiritual community. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce JoAnn Wilson.
Hello. Nice
So
to nice to be here.
yes, indeed. We're actually really happy to have you. And today we are talking about letting go. And more importantly, in the spiritual world, we talk about attachments. So we're actually going to look at both as far as letting go and attachments. What are they? How do we let go? What are some tried and true, proven techniques that we've done to kind of get around that? Obviously, we're all human, so that's something that the universe tests us with all the time. But without diving directly into that, I'd like to just give everyone a little bit of history, because when we David and I talk, we actually talk about our week and such, and we also talk about, without going into that, but we also talk about relating to our subject matter. How did you get into this industry? And not so much, I don't want to look at it as an industry since I'm a business person, I kind of compartmentalize, but everyone has our awakening moment. And so if you'd like to go a little bit into what was your eye-opening awakening moment?
I actually had this wonderful awakening a moment. Um, my sister-in-law kept telling me about this place called Berkeley Psychic Institute, and I could go there and get a psychic reading. And I said, "Great, I'll do that." Didn't do it. She mentioned it again, didn't do it. Then one day there's a knock on my door. She's standing there. She says, "Get your purse." I got my purse. She put me in her car. She drove me over to Berkeley Psychic Institute in San Jose. Went inside, paid for a reading. She says, "I'll be back in 2 hours," and left. Just left me there.
Mm.
So I started, at the time, I was in my late 30s. So I started having this reading by these two young women. They must have been in their very, very early 20s. And I'm thinking, what do these two little whippersnappers know? Haven't been around very long. So they start giving me this reading. And the longer it went on, the better it was. I enjoyed it. Then one of them said to me, "You look like you're all dressed up and nowhere to go." And that totally blew me away because I'd felt that way my entire life, that I was all dressed up and didn't have anywhere to go. And so I said to myself, if she can see that, then I need to be here. I need to learn how to do this. And that's when I started studying at Berkeley Psychic Institute, learning to read auras and so forth. So that was my awakening moment. You're all dressed up and nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go, and that was the defining moment for you. What was really interesting is the similarities of how there are no accidents in the synchronicity of how we come together. And when you had mentioned your age, it's really interesting. At Horizon Center, it's pretty much you can pretty much gamble, if we were gambling people, of what certain types of people that would come into Horizon, and overwhelmingly, myself included, mid to late 30s, and it was one of those things where life is going fantastic, and then it's not, and you're trying everything within your own power to control, and it's not happening, and so we reach a point where we actually have to look outside of ourselves for help, and many people walk into Horizon Center in that same scenario. And one thing that I love pointing out, or I want to point out with you here, is a lot of people like myself kind of go in there. Not that we have a not a prototype or a profile, but there are a lot of us that were coming into Horizon. I'm not sure you can give me your experience with Berkeley Psychic Institute, but you said that there were some 20-year-olds that were giving readings. But for people that were coming into Horizon, they were mid to late 30s, they were single, or they were married without children. And you had a statement about that.
I did make a statement about that because I noticed that as well, that the women, primarily the women that were involved, most of them didn't have children.
Hmm.
You know, about half or more were married with no children, and the other half were not married. So my take on that was that when they chose this life and what they wanted to do, they wanted to be able to do everything they needed to do without, children take up at least about 18 years of your life or more, actually more, but, very active. And so they wanted that time to spend finding themselves or doing what they came here to do. So they chose not to have children, which is a very valid, actually.
Hmm. It reminds me of before I met you. It was the year 2009 where I was following the famous book Yes Man, which ultimately became a movie. Jim Carrey was the Yes Man, and I had to say I did a test where I said yes to everything. So I found myself in Toronto because somebody said go to Toronto and go to a Hay House thing because I was really interested in Hay House, still am, and I was there. And I met this one girl there, and without going, to that whole thing, but I met this girl there, and she was pregnant, and I had introduced her to one of the people that were at the booth for. They were at an adjoining seminar that was across from us, from Hay House, and it was like a yoga / physical therapy thing, and so this lady. Who's now a really good friend of mine, she was doing cranial sacral therapy. And so I took my friend there that I just met, and I was like, oh my goodness, my reading that I had never had a cranial sacral therapy reading before. It was fantastic, right? So I'm telling everybody about it. Everybody that knows me, if I like something, I want the world to know. So I told this girl that, and she was pregnant. And long story short, the girl was crying at the end, and you kind of open up some emotions when you get some reading sometimes. And so I asked her, and I was like, if you feel comfortable telling me, then I'm all for it. If you want to keep it to yourself, it's fine too. And she said, no, I'll tell you. So in that reading, she was pregnant, like I mentioned. And in the reading, the reader had mentioned her child that was in the womb. And the child felt that the mother didn't want the child to incarnate in this life. And so that's when the woman kind of opened up, and she was like, yes, my husband and I, it's our first baby. It's not an ideal scenario. We're not really sure if this is going to happen or if we really want this to happen. And the baby kind of knew this in the astral. Right. And so, as we talk about letting go, the woman really had a bond, like, no, I really want to have this baby now. And, talking to her, the child is like 7 or 8 years old now. Mm-hmm. But it was just really interesting as we talk about letting go and attachments that I wanted to share that particular story as to people coming to Horizon, single or married without children. So I wanted to highlight letting go, because there is some level of letting go of certain attachments. I know myself, I was a big corporate guy and clean shaven, not like I am today. And, I had this persona, and things went according to plan for a long time. And it was really funny going through some of the courses with you. And I was at a point in my life where I really wanted to go back to that life. And you're like, you have to let it go. You have an attachment there, and you have to let it go. And, I laugh at it now, but at the time I was just like, I don't like the way this is going. I don't have any control. What's happening here? What's happening? And, if I don't know what I would have done if I didn't go through Horizon. So, to be honest. And
a lot of the things that we think are important are no longer important, and you say, how can that not be important now? It was so important, not that long ago, and now.
I was actually a liar, and I was like, well, what do you mean by that? And she had said that, Hamza, there are two Hamzas, and not that I had a split personality or anything, but she said there's two Hamzas, and I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, you meet a female companion, and you may be on the surface level for like 6 months. I mean, you could talk about, I don't know, TMZ and things like that. right? And then if you really like the person after 6 months, then you show the real Hamza, like the hard stuff, like, and you're scaring these people off. So I had an attachment of I couldn't let them see my true self. They couldn't see my true self, or it was a worthiness issue, right? So I had to let go of that attachment of they had to like me for me, not pretending to be someone else, right? Even though some of that was a part of me. I mean, I don't watch TMZ or anything like that, but the let's just say the type of girl that I was attracted to back then is different than it is today.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, is there right now all these years, and you have years of experience, and as life goes on, but can you think of a scenario where you had an attachment that you had to let go?
Well, I think you. I was trying to think of something. The kind of attachments that it's not an easy answer. Okay. So it is really taking me years to get to the place where I can let things go. It's not something you can say, well, do this, and then you'll be able to let go. It doesn't work that way. It's taken me years, and it's taken me years of using tools that I learned at Berkeley Psychic Institute. So, the main one is blowing roses. So, the attachment, and this has been recently, let me talk about that one. Okay. It's the strongest. It has to do with my son, Scott, who passed away 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And where I am now with that versus where I was when it first happened. And I have to be very careful when I share that with people because I tend to sound uncaring that he passed away. And it's not that I'm uncaring, it's that I see it totally differently than I did years ago. Mm-hmm. Repeat the question, please.
Well, I want to steer you in the direction for that one because I have a story to share based off of your experience that you shared with Scott. And so if you'd like to talk a little bit about how you felt then versus how you felt now. And then after that, you had mentioned roses. So I understand roses, but as far as a tool, what are roses?
So when Scott first passed away, of course, I'm his mother, right? And I felt the pain of his leaving, and I'm thinking, oh, my grandkids, they need their father, and all those things. His wife, who was very, deeply saddened by that loss. And so, of course, I'm going through all of that, and what are they going to do without him? What am I going to do without him? Not being able to see him again. And when he passed away, in the early days of his passing, he was very much willing to communicate with me and to communicate with his wife. So I had a lot of communication with him, and every once in a while I'd be at the center, and I'd be doing an energy healing, and I'd look up, and he's sitting there in a chair, in the room, and I kind of chuckle, and I thought, oh, my son's here. And he would proceed to tell me how wonderful it was where he was. Just absolutely wonderful. He says, you have no idea. And he'd just repeat that, you have no idea. He'd say it over and over, and he'd point his finger at me, you have no idea how wonderful it is here. So he also encouraged me, within a day or two of his passing, to stop crying. He says, Mom, please stop crying. He says it makes it very difficult for me to come and communicate with you and be with you when you're, crying your eyes out. So I said, okay. And I did. I pretty much stopped crying and have cried very little since that day. Not because I don't care, but it was obviously something that was important to him in order to communicate with me, and I wanted that communication. So we communicated for quite a bit of time. And what he taught me was that it is a different place, and who he was when he was here is not who he was after he passed, and not who he is going to be shortly. He will be someone else. So that person that I knew here, I need to let that go. I mean, because it's not him. It's not him anymore. And someone told me, a friend, a very excellent psychic, a friend of mine, she taught at Horizon Healing, And she says, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think it looks like he's going to incarnate as a redheaded boy, a redheaded little boy. So I'm saying, okay. So here, Scott was like 6'2". He probably weighed 280. Big black man. And he could be the sweetest thing in the world, but he could also be very gruff. So I'm thinking, Scott, and I think of this little redheaded kid, and I go, oh my goodness. So it really brings home how the body has nothing to do with it. Nothing. It's the spirit. The same spirit is going to be in that redheaded little boy, maybe. I'm not saying that's what he's going to do, but, let's say he chooses that. That was in this big black man. And so we've got to get over that. I've got to get over what he looked like and how he was when he was here. I have to let go of that because it wasn't who he was in his transition, and it's going to be entirely different in his next life because he has different things. He came here to learn something. He's gone, so he must have learned what he wanted to, and now he's taking his next step. What it is he wants to learn in that little redheaded boy's body, I have no idea. But, so I find myself looking at little redheaded boys. When I say, Scott? Is that you, Scott?
Yeah.
I'm teasing about that.
Yeah.
But, so letting go of attachments, that his death is what, even after 30-something years, I was not fully able to do it until he helped me and taught me how to do it with his passing.
And that story is so impactful for myself included because I was instantly reminded of that last year this time, right? And so, what is it? Today's the 16th, so I think at the end of the month, they're going to have our sons, our daughters, which is a suicide group here in Georgia, or it's actually a global group, but they meet here in Georgia to another friend of mine whose daughter had done that act. And so I was sharing the story about your son, and then my sister who actually had gone through that type of scenario as well. And it was really interesting when she first transitioned. I had a lot of attachments of her as a child, and why, like most people, there's these unanswered questions, but she would go away immediately, like there was no, like she couldn't stick around. And then it reminded me of you. It may have been one of the first times Scott had come around. It's like you're so happy to see them, it could be in a dream state. And you have that bliss, and he's like, yeah, okay, we're good, let's party. And then all of a sudden you just drop back down to the mud and the muck of why, what happened, and then he's gone. And then my sister the same way, and it reminded me of Abraham as well, because Abraham's like, whenever Esther gets down, they're like, we're not coming down to that level. We can't, nor do we don't have any desire to. So when you raise your vibration, you had a greater relationship with Scott, and I had a greater relationship with my sister.
Well, I had a friend who cried for over a year. I mean, literally daily, often cried about the loss of her child. And I tried to share with her that, as my son told me, he says, look, I don't want to come see you if you're going to be crying. So if you want me to visit you, you got to stop crying. I tried to help her with how important that was, that they don't.
Right.
So that old third dimension, we have to be so drained and sad about losing our children, we have to kind of remember the original way it works. We take body after body after body primarily to learn things, and we sometimes we're women, and sometimes we're men, and sometimes we're black, sometimes we're white, sometimes we're we pick these different places and types for lessons. And like Scott, he wanted to get on with his next lessons. He didn't want to be held to that old picture of him. He wants to create something new. So, I have to go along with that.
Sure.
And let it go. And, now he's on to something new. And I don't mean to him at this time what I meant to him when he was alive. And I have to understand that and let that go as well.
Absolutely.
I've had people come into the center. I had a young man come to the center. He was about 6'5", big, tall, handsome, good-looking young white man in his early 20s, and he had seen the website and something clicked for him, and he came in and he said, "I just wanted to meet you," and he gave me a big hug, and I recognized his energy. I gave him a hug back, and I never saw him again. But he knew I had been his mother in some life, and he just wanted to have that brief connection, and then he was gone. And so I find that many people who would come into Horizon, for instance, one gentleman took classes, and every time he'd walk in the door, I would look at him and I would see this little boy, about 2 years old, little snotty-nosed little boy, about 2 years old, who would cling to my leg as a child. You know, those little kids that grab the mother's leg and won't let go? Well, that was him. Here's a grown man walks through the door, and this is what I'm seeing. A little snotty-nosed little boy who's grabbing onto my leg. And it was, it was nice to see his spirit again, even though it was in a different body. But, I had to let go of that little 2-year-old. And he meant just as much to me when I was his mother as my own children. But, you've got to let go of that and move on. So Scott really taught me mostly about letting go and moving on.
Mm-hmm. Now, with family members, not obviously, but there's more emotion to it because these are people you potentially have grown up with for a majority of your incarnation in this life. And the other side of that is attachments as far as judgment. So, what's interesting about Abraham talks about people like... even now, our current president, should he, God forbid, but if he were to transition, people would feel a certain way, right? Or people in the past, like a Mussolini or Hitler and such, and they think that they're in this place, not with everyone else. Like they can't get behind the VIP line, and we have an attachment based off of their incarnation. But that isn't always the case, and I think Scott was kind of alluding to that. Like, we have no idea of how we're putting judgments on our limited viewpoint. And but I wanted to talk about that a little bit because Scott wouldn't talk about, and you had some experiences at both Horizon and at Berkeley Psychic Institute with the psychic cops, right? And so cosmic cops, right? And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because on some level you have to let that attachment go of who they were in a previous life. Like you mentioned that before, we were male, female, black, white, or what have you. In some lives, we were very, since it's Easter, right? We've been very religious. In others, we've been charlatans. Like, we've run the gamut.
Yes, murders, rapists, absolutely everything, which is what I learned the most of, and appreciated the most about Berkeley Psychic Institute was how to find neutrality. How can I judge this man who has raped 10 little 5-year-old girls? Okay, this lifetime, his lifetime, this lifetime. I have to look back and say, well, guess what? You were a male in Genghis Khan's army, and you raped 100 2-year-old girls. Mm-hmm. So be careful when you start to judge. Mm-hmm. So the key there is forget that that's a horrid picture to have in one's mind, but it's all about forgiveness. So as tough as it is, it's the most important thing there is, forgiving and learning to forgive. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I've been watching TV, and there's been lots of random shootings here and there, and young teenagers and kids getting shot accidentally here and there, and sometimes on purpose. And what I've noticed is that the parents or the relatives are saying, I'm going to forgive him. I'm going, wow, I'm seeing that a lot. That's awesome. I forgive him for injuring and killing my child. That's incredible. So hopefully that energy will sweep the world, maybe before all these missiles and bombs get out there. But it is very important because we've all done it all.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you want to judge someone, just because you're not doing it this lifetime, doesn't mean you haven't done it.
Right. And when we were, I want to stay here and play with you on this one. So when we were talking about a cosmic cop had come in, there was one particular incident at Horizon. Someone had come in and they were a little different than everyone else had come in for an energy healing. Would you like to share that story?
I think that's one that David had shared with you, and it may be a little bit different than my experience, but he got whacked, I believe. I wasn't there, but
No, not that one. The one where you were at Horizon at an energy healing, and this young lady sits down and
oh, okay. Yeah, that wasn't quite a the one who was spinning.
yeah.
The reason we're chuckling is because we were at Horizon and we have our healing clinic. And this one, Carol, who's worked, as a teacher there, she invited this lady that she had met at Whole Foods to come over for a healing. And this was a beautiful young black woman. Her hair and makeup and clothes and nails were just perfect.
Mm-hmm.
She walked in the door and she was just beautiful. So she sits down for a healing, and Carol is giving her this healing. And the next thing I know, there's a post there that was blocking my view, so I couldn't see the woman, but I could see Carol. And Carol is slowly backing up. Her eyes are big as saucers, and she's just backing up, having her hands out. And so I peeked around the post, and there was this beautiful. She was literally, her face was all gnarled and twisted, and she was gyrating, and she had this being inside of her that was causing her to have some difficulties with her body.
Mm-hmm.
And it was incredible. Carol wasn't sure what to do. And when I first saw it, I wasn't sure what to do. But almost instantly, within seconds, this energy comes pouring from the source, from God, the source, pouring through my crown chakra into my body, giving me and reminding me I've done this before, all the information I needed to resolve that problem. So, I did a little bit of energy work on her and so forth. And so we helped her out a little bit, but it was pretty incredible to see that, almost like the head turning and split pea soup coming out like they have in the TV. But that wasn't a cosmic cop. That was, she actually had a being that had that takes over her body periodically, and she came there because it happens all the time. And I guess that's why she always keeps herself looking so nice.
Yeah.
So when it's not in there, she's perfectly normal. And then when that being pops in, it's pretty scary.
Sure. And yeah, I had associated that with the cosmic cop, but there was another story, like you were saying, with David talking about that. Just go a little bit about that, because I have something to add to it.
I haven't had too many instances with cosmic cops, but basically they're here. They come in when someone incarnates who has done some really horrible, tons of terrible things. They will incarnate and they will be assigned some cosmic cops, primarily to keep them from remembering what they did. If they start to remember what they did, they would not make any progress. They would just want to, oh God, I'm going to kill myself. I did all these horrible things, and they would make no progress. Mm-hmm. So they have to come in. That's why we're born not remembering. We start all over. Mm-hmm. And most people don't remember their lives before. Maybe after time they find some out, but usually not at birth. So when they've been really bad, cosmic cops will. And I use that word bad. I don't think that's the correct word. But anyway, a cosmic cop may be assigned to them. Mm-hmm. And so if let's say a person goes to get a psychic reading and someone's looking at them and they might be ready to say, oh my goodness, you were in Hitler's army and you beheaded, 10,000 people. The cosmic cop will kind of give them a whack and say, no, 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 you will not share that information. It's pretty clear that you cannot share that type of information, because that being right now is trying to get on a different track, and all that old stuff is not of help.
Right.
So that's what the cosmic cop does. They protect that being from finding out some of that stuff they did in their current lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And I love that story, because you're talking about a clean slate. And
yes.
You're saying that, thankfully you don't remember what happened in the previous life. Well, I have two questions to go into that, because I really love Dr. Weiss, Brian Weiss, and he always does like past life regressions and such. So what's your thought on letting go or having attachments to a past life regression? Because it could be attractive to find out that, not necessarily the scary stuff, but if you were a king, or, there's some people that want to get a past life reading every month. So what's your take on that with regards to attachments?
Well, just in general, speaking about past lives, I love them. Mm-hmm. I love reading them. I love looking at my own. To me, that tells us more about who we are as a spirit than anything. I know a lot of people are really into this genetic information on, what races they were and what countries they're from. But, for instance, if I do that this lifetime, it's going to tell me about this body I'm in. Right? But if in the next lifetime I'm in a body that has blonde hair and blue eyes, then that body's got a different history. And another body would have a different history. So you're going to have different histories with all these bodies. However, if you get a past life reading, then you're reading about you as a spirit, no matter what body you were in. What did you do when you were in this body? What did you do when you were in this next body? What were some of the things? So from my point of view, I like that better. Mm-hmm. Of course, everyone can't ever, they don't have an ad on TV. Oh, come get a past life reading and find out who you were. They want to tell you, what country you were from. But I find it extremely valuable. And you can't get those right away. That's why you don't get those till you're older. You can't get that at 5 and 6, because it's going to interfere.
Right.
But at this point, and at the point I'm at, turning 75 in a month, I can handle it.
Sure.
And so, they're extremely significant to me.
Okay. Now, it's funny when you're talking about clean slate and such, and so that's in a previous life. But have you ever, like, one thing that I just had some reunions last year. So I had a high school reunion, I had a college reunion, right? And I didn't graduate at the same time for both of those, for those doing the math. But anyway, what's really interesting is when you see these people you may not have seen for 10, 15, all these extra other years, right? But you're actually brought back to that time where you actually were in that space at the time. And they could have transcended so many different areas. Even yourself have changed from the way you were 10, 15 years old. And it's just really interesting because I saw that. It may just be your capacity on your phone. I'm not sure. But you can hit record again. Yeah, it started up. So, but it's really interesting that we have this attachment of, this person, I used to slam you in a locker. And this person is like a CEO of a Fortune 1,000 company now. Right. It's just, we have these attachments of, certain grade, I used to pull her hair, and, now I get a lawsuit over it. But it's just really funny. That's a great example of letting go, because it makes sense. You haven't seen these people, but there's others with marriage and such where you have an attachment to maybe that first marriage, and you haven't moved on from that marriage because every other person you meet reminds you of that. So you're actually kind of stuck. And you were talking about roses and tools and such. So I wanted to talk about some potential tools that you've used that have helped you with your attachments.
Well, for me, the favorite one is blowing roses.
Okay.
So it's something that was taught at Berkeley Psychic Institute. It's certainly something that I taught at Horizon healing center, Horizon Center for Intuitive Awareness. It's called Blowing Roses. And that's where you actually put the image of a person or a thing into a rose and blow it up. And on the surface it sounds, whoa, blow it up, because I could put my mother in a rose and blow it up. I'm not blowing up my mother. I'm simply blowing up any energy of hers that she left in my space, for instance. She'd come over to visit, and she'd love me so much, she'd leave a part of her in my space, and then she'd go home. So by putting her in a rose and blowing her up, I could send back to her that part of her energy that she left with me. It doesn't do me any good. Her energy doesn't work in my body, and it works much better in her body. And she's also missing some of her energy. So when I put her in a rose and blow her up, it allows her energy to go back to her, making her more complete, and actually making me more complete because she's not in my space. So you can do that with lots of things, parents, lovers, friends, children, car salesmen, insurance people, everything. You can put in roses and blow it up. And things, it doesn't just have to be a person, there are things, for instance, I have a tendency to see an image of something, and if it's just the slightest bit not nice, it sticks with me and it makes me feel terrible. So I will put those kinds of things in a rose and blow them up several times, over and over and over, until I stop seeing that funky energy, that funky picture. And when I'm on the internet, they're always showing some picture of some ugly something or other.
Sure.
Your insides, or
yes.
And I tend to take those with me, so I really blow a lot of roses when I'm on the internet to keep that energy out of my space. It works very, very well.
Absolutely.
Excellent tool.
Absolutely. And another tool that makes me, that was my introduction to Horizon, and many others were energy healing. So we didn't necessarily blow roses when we first walked in the door, but we were introduced to energy healing. So I like to talk about that because that is some level of letting go. So what people came into Horizon for an energy healing, what did that entail?
Well, we recognize that people pick up energy. You cannot walk through this world on a daily basis without picking up some energy. You pick up energy if you're going to be riding the bus, or taking a cab, or going to school, or going to work. Just driving on the roads of Atlanta, you're going to pick up tons of energy. And so, over a period of time, you look up, and while most people don't recognize it, they are not who they are. They're just loaded with all this energy that doesn't belong to them. It's not theirs. And they feel different. They don't feel good. They don't know why they don't feel good. They're not sleeping, and so forth. So what we learned to do at the center was to remove energy out of one's aura and chakras that's not theirs, and to bring back their energy that they may have left somewhere, and bring it back to them, so that they feel better, feel more whole, feel more who they are. When you have all that other energy in your space, sometimes you make decisions that are, not yours. They're someone else's. Just a quick example is, my sister bought a pair of jeans, and everyone would tease us about our, we're old ladies, right? So all our jeans were baggy, and they just look like terrible.
They're baggy. Are you ready for a rap video, or what do you mean?
No, just loose fitting, not looking good. So
Sure.
We go over to this cow town or horse town thing down the street from us, and she got a pair of jeans, and she looked really good in them, even though we're old ladies. So I said, I want a pair too. So she had bought a pair of boot cut. So I go in there and say, I want to get some jeans, and this is my size, and I want boot cut. So I get these jeans, and I get home, and I look down, and they've got this boot cut, which is designed to go over a boot, right? Well, I don't have any boots,
Yes.
And so now there's all this fabric down there, and I think, now why did you get boot cut? You don't own any boots, and I should have got straight cut. However, my sister's energy was in my space, so when I went to buy my jeans, I had bootcut energy in my space, and that's what I got. So if I had just maybe cleared my energy out a little bit before I went shopping, so I would get what I wanted, what I needed, I would have got straight cut. But so sometimes this is how someone else's energy can affect us. We end up doing things that aren't really us. They're our mother, our sister, our friend, our boss, even if it's just a tiny bit, you know. And when you have a lot of energy in your space that's not yours, then it's hard to, you know, be who you really are.
So you're saying it's ongoing. You can't just clean your space at the beginning of the year and you're good.
Well, no, it's not a one-time thing. It's pretty much continual unless you're off on an island somewhere, unless you're, you know, you meditate a lot. I'm sure the Dalai Lama, you know, cleans his space out regularly. So it's, you know, you have to work on it. You can't just do it one time. It's not a one-time thing.
Sure. And we're currently getting summoned right now, so you guys know for the holiday, we're actually going to cut this short. But hopefully we didn't scare you off with just some preliminary softballs. We tried to throw you some softballs today, and I really enjoyed having you. We'd love to have you again.
We saved the hard stuff for later.
Yeah.
The woo-woo stuff is coming later.
Woo-woo stuff's later to be continued. But again, it was my pleasure having you on, and hopefully we'll have you in the near future. Thanks for being a guest for the Intrinsic Motivation. And thank you guys, and happy holidays for those that celebrate it.
Happy Easter.
Yes, and we'll talk to you soon. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks.